Hello all of you lovely people, Jules here for WhatCulture.com, and today I want to talk to you about The Thing, or more specifically, seeing as that is very vague, John Carpenter's The Thing. Now this 1982 classic is one of the most celebrated sci-fi horror movies ever, and with good reason. Thanks to Bill Lancaster's impeccably tight script, paranoia-soaked atmosphere, and a haunting accompanying soundtrack, Carpenter and his team delivered something that spoke to a fear within us all, namely, when push comes to shove, who can you really trust? Though focusing on one anchor point in the film, that being R.J. McCreedy, we as an audience aren't exactly privy to all the details and movements of The Thing. That made moments like the blood test scene become all the more haunting as no one saw Palmer become assimilated. And while speculation still runs rampant about who really is the Thing come the close of the film, today we're going to look at the events prior in an effort to piece together who was infected and when. So don't trust your eyes as appearances are fleeting, as I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are the exact moments that each person became assimilated in The Thing. Number 9. Vance Norris. Oh Vance, how we hardly knew ye. The geologist for US Outpost 31 is one of the least developed characters in the entire film, but what we can glean from discussions from the group and his interactions with them is that he was Gary's first pick to take over command once his leadership began to falter, which implies that they had a good relationship. And also we know the fact that he had a weak heart, the latter of which inadvertently leads the viewer to find out that he has indeed been assimilated, and it also gives us that gruesome defibrillator scene. However, the question of when he was infected is something that's been debated for years thanks to a conflicting silhouette that is seen when Dog Thing is exploring the outpost. Fans speculate that this image could only be that of Palmer or Norris. Windows is also a candidate, but we all know what happens to him later in the film. And while the producer Stuart Cohen later stated that it was originally meant to be Palmer, that collar definitely matches Norris's clothing almost perfectly. And as we remember, that was the original plan for it to be Palmer, meaning that it has to be Norris in the final version who becomes Patient Zero. Number 8. Palmer. So with Norris taking our first spot, who's next? Well, Palmer's fate is tied to that of the dirty drawers that Knowles finds. The discovery of the ripped clothing marks a point that the Thing tears through the host body's clothes when it's assimilating them, and thanks to some logical reasoning, it turns out that Palmer was the unfortunate second victim. A few of the team are shown to be wearing long johns throughout the film, and yet Palmer is the only member who can't be accounted for out of Copper, McCreedy, Knowles, and Blair, who are visibly seen sporting the rather fashionable bodysuits. Now, Copper and McCreedy don't get infected, and we will get to McCreedy later. Knowles gets attacked by the Thing later when responding to Gary's attack, and Blair at this point is still doing everything he can to stop the spread of the Thing. Therefore, it has to be Palmer who is attacked next, either by Dog Thing in the silhouette scene if we're to go back and rechange that to what was originally intended, or by Kennel Thing in a more aggressive and desperate manner which would actually explain the torn clothes. Number 7. George Bennings. Well, you can't get a more concrete answer to when was Bennings assimilated than by literally seeing the man getting pulled into the disgusting folds of the Thing. But what's interesting to note here is that we see Bennings without a top on, which proves that the assimilation does indeed rip through clothing, meaning that any wardrobe changes from this point on should be taken pretty seriously. Also, it's in this scene that we get an answer as to who actually sabotaged the blood supply, as Windows, in his shock, drops the keys to the cabinet as revealed through an audio clue. The Thing, in the form of Palmer, Norris, or even one of the dogs, simply takes the keys, slashes the blood, and then deposits them back within Gary's belongings in order to sow the seeds of doubt even further. Pretty clever, right? Number 6. Blair. While the audience might have a ton of emotional investment in McCreedy, it's Blair that acts as the film's guiding force of reason up until his rapid descent into madness. It's his research that informs the team how the Thing assimilates people and what would happen should it make it back to civilization. It's this knowledge that causes Blair's erratic behavior, as his sabotage of the helicopter and radio equipment is done to prevent the Thing from escaping to the mainland. Yet, in a shocking turn, when the group comes to test the blood of Blair, it's revealed that he's not only disappeared, but he's also been building a spacecraft. So the question remains, when did Blair become infected? So in between his personal lockdown, 2 days are said to have passed, with the group bringing him food and monitoring his activity. As we know that Norris and Palmer are assimilated at this point, it's not unreasonable to assume that they approached Blair and infected him as well. However, if this wasn't the case, then you can actually find some on-screen evidence of when he was actually infected, because in the autopsy scene, it explicitly shows Blair touch the thing's body with a medical device before placing it to his lips. For a man who detailed that a single cell could indeed infect an entire human host, that was not a smart move. Number 5. Fuchs. Fuchs has possibly the most brain-scratching death in the entire movie, as when the team finds his charred remains and asserts that he's just taken his own life by burning himself to death, at no point does anyone seem to consider the following point. Why would he want to kill himself? I know that the situation looks dire, but we've just seen him working incredibly hard on a new experiment for the team to test for infections, and despite doubting himself a lot, he seemed to really want to work with the team rather than against it. It's actually much more reasonable to accept that Fuchs was instead murdered by none other than Blair Thing. In order for Blair Thing to build its ship, it would have had to scavenge parts from the facility, and under the blanket of a power outage, which we can assume it started, the creature began to move through the outpost. This attracted the attention of Fuchs, who followed the unseen figure outside. Now, Fuchs and Blair work together a lot and are referenced in the film to be close friends. Therefore, seeing Blair pass by the door would indeed cause him to give chase. Confronted outside, Blair likely turned on Fuchs, but instead of assimilating him, overpowered, killed, and then burned the body. At this point, assimilating would be too time-consuming, and the spaceship assembly would need to take precedence. Leaving the body for others to find not only removed a potential hazard for Blair Thing, but actually also threw them off the scent as they tried to rationalize Fuchs's actions. Which is pretty brilliant, right? Number 4. Copper and Clark. It's possibly the saddest thing to say that these men were actually lucky to have died without being infected. Well, that being said, only Clark gets a quick end being shot in the head by McCreedy, while poor old Copper has to witness his own arms being bitten off by Norris Thing before dying. Rough. Number 3. Windows, Gary, and Knowles. Now, I've grouped these 3 men together because they are all killed by the Thing, but are not shown to be assimilated fully. Windows had his head munched on like he was a bug in a Venus flytrap and is burned shortly after. Gary is force-fed Blair Thing's hand in a rather disgusting but visually impressive scene, thus officially ending his command of Outpost 31. Knowles, who in an ironic twist considering that he was ready to sell McCreedy down the river, is actually his last ally in the closing moments of the film, but after going to check on Gary, is taken down by the Thing off screen. It's actually pretty likely that Blair Thing assimilated these 2 men and any other remnants of the dog thing that might have survived, as its final form is clearly made up of several different and very disgusting elements. Number 2. Childs. And so we come to the most discussed closing segments of all of film history. Has Childs been assimilated come the end of The Thing? The answer, as with nearly every other question posed for this film, isn't exactly an easy one to pin down, as there are multiple reasons for and against Childs being an imposter. In fact, I detailed this in full in its own separate video on That Film Theory, which I totally recommend you go and watch, by the way. However, in short, the evidence for Childs being infected is as follows. He left his station to chase Blair, which was observed by Knowles, despite this being the last thing that a human would want to do given the dire situation, and that the room that he left also contained the generator, which just so happened to go out moments after he left. And finally, he's not even wearing the same clothing as when we last saw him, implying that he was assimilated and shredded his original clothes. Then there are some smaller details, such as the limited steam coming out from Childs when he speaks in the freezing cold, which does make it all seem pretty watertight that he's infected, right? Well, let's cement things even further by throwing in a bit of a curveball with McCreedy's final action of passing Childs a bottle to drink from. Now, if Childs was human, he'd know that the infection could be spread through fluids like saliva and would refuse to accept the drink, which could mean that McCreedy is laughing because he now knows the truth. Or it might be the fact that this actually isn't alcohol at all, but rather gasoline that he's just passed to Childs. After all, we've just seen him use Molotovs to blow up the base mere moments before, and we never actually see McCreedy take a swig of the stuff. By passing this to Childs and witnessing him drink it, McCreedy then laughs at us again. He knows he's truly alone. So when would Childs have been infected? Well, if you look at the scene in which Childs is shown guarding the interior section of the outpost, there's an open door behind him. It's likely, therefore, that Blair Thing snuck in, assimilated him, changed his clothes, and planned to let Childs freeze as another means of infecting humanity when they came to recover the bodies. Number 1, McCreedy. It seems incredibly strange to even suggest that McCreedy was ever assimilated, seeing as we see the majority of the movie through his eyes. However, as is detailed in full on the Who is Really Human at the End of the Thing video on that film theory that I tried to plug before, there are moments where an infection could have happened. After all, Knowles does find his clothes all torn up, and he does disappear for quite some time, during which he could well have been assimilated. However, the bigger question is, why? Why doesn't he torch the others when he has the chance? Why does Blair think trying to kill him? And why doesn't he try to kill Charles at the end? Well, it's all to do, if you follow this theory, with how the Thing operates. There's no suggestion that other variants of the Thing work together. All they want to do is survive whatever the cost, and there's no camaraderie in that motive. Therefore, it could well be that with just a simple sabotage of a blood test in which he took somebody else's sample and focusing all of his efforts into playing the part of a human, McCreedy Thing might well be a very real aspect of the film. Personally, I find less weight in this because there's much more evidence to suggest the alternative, but still, with a film this dense, you need to consider every option. And there we go, my friends. That was the exact moment that each person became assimilated in The Thing. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below, as well as any other theories that you might have, because there are tons. And this is not, despite my own opinions, a cemented timeline. I mean, there are tons of variants, and I'd love to hear your opinions on that. If you want to chat to me further, you can do so over on Twitter at RetroJ, or you can swing by Live and Let's Dice. It's my personal gaming channel where I stream every single Wednesday and Sunday. But before I go, I just want to say one thing. I hope that you are treating yourself well, both mentally and physically, and remember, despite us detailing a lot about men who were trapped in the frozen wastes and couldn't trust each other, that you are not alone. Friends, family, professionals in the support industry, these people care about you and want you to do well, and they are not trying to assimilate you, my friends. They are not trying to make you feel better. They are just trying to make you realize what a big ledge you are. Now go out there and absolutely smash it, like it was Blair against the generator. Big love from me to you. As always, I've been Jules, you have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon.